No, of course not. Okay, congratulations, folks. You are attending today for the most difficult passage in the New Testament. Pardon me? Yes? I didn't find it. Someone found it for me. This is from Luke chapter 16. Hey, Matthew. What, do you think it's warm out or something? Got your Hawaiian shirt on? Welcome back. Is it warm in Tulsa? Good to have you back. You here for the summer? Oh, good. Luke chapter 16. Now he was saying to the disciples, there was a rich man who had a manager, and this manager was reported to him as squandering his possessions. And he called him and said to him, "What is this I hear about you? Give an accounting of your management, for you can no longer be manager." And the manager said to himself, "What shall I do, since my master is taking the management away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I shall do, so that when I'm removed from the management, people will welcome me into their homes." And he summoned each of his master's debtors, and he began saying to the first, "How much do you owe my master?" And he said, 100 measures of oil. And he said to him, "Take your bill, sit down quickly, and write 50. And he said to another, "How much do you owe?" And he said, 100 measures of wheat. And he said to him, "Take your bill and write 80. And his master praised the unrighteous manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the sons of this age are more shrewd in relation to their own kind than the sons of light." Now that doesn't sound like it should belong in the Bible, does it? But there it is. So we have to figure out what it means. Let me just tell you where I'm going today. I'm going to give you definitions of 3 words. And the definitions of those 3 words have to be understood in order to understand this passage. And the reason I have to give you the definition of the 3 words is because 2 of the words are not used by us in the 21st century. And the 3rd word is a word that we don't even really know. And so as we begin, we'll look at this passage as it is, and then I'll draw the conclusion to the passage which follows. I did not read that part. Okay. The word house is not a house as we think of it. We say, well, that structure is a house when people live in it, it's a home. But house has a completely different definition in the Bible, both in the Old Testament and the New Testament. We get our understanding of what a house is from the biblical idea of what a house is, but let me just show you that house in the Bible refers to a person, a man and a wife, and all of their descendants. Here's a couple of examples. The sons of Joseph, which Joseph was one of the children of Israel, who were born to him in Egypt were 2. All the persons of the house of Jacob who came to Egypt were 70. So Joseph had descendants, Jacob had descendants who were 70 people at that time. And so it was called to be the house of Jacob. Later on, in the book of Ruth, it says, all the people who were in the court and the elders said, "We are witnesses." And then they gave this blessing: "May the Lord make the woman who's coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, both of whom built the house of Israel, and may you achieve wealth and become famous in Bethlehem." So in this case, a Moabite woman named Ruth is coming she's joining the Israelites, and they put this blessing over her that she would be like the progenitors of the nation of Israel, and that her descendants would become famous in Bethlehem. And we know that this is an ancestor of Jesus. And so the idea, the house of Jacob and the house of Israel are exactly the same because Jacob and Israel are the same person. His birth name was Jacob. God changed his name to Israel. So a house, in the context of what we're talking about, has to do with the head of the house, all the people who are born into the house, all the employees who are in the family group, in the business, or whatever it is, descended from that person. That's what the house is. And so the house of God consists of all the people. It's like the word Catholic, all the people, all the time and everywhere. So when we look at this passage, when it says house, and it says house a lot, think of this greater picture of what a house is. Number 2, mammon. Mammon is translated in newer versions, money. But the idea of mammon, this is an old word that isn't used anymore, but the idea of money is money that is used for illegitimate purposes. So if you were going to take your money and you were going to spend it on drugs, or if you're going to sell drugs and take money for the drugs or any other illicit activity, it would be called mammon. And in our translation, it talks about money, but the original word is mammon. And it says in Timothy, the love of money, which is mammon, is the root of all sorts of evil. It does not say money is the roots of all sorts of evil. That's what people say. But the Bible says the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. So people will do anything to get the money, any evil thing. And so to understand that if that's your God, then you have to do something illicit to get it. And here we have an example of a guy who has done so. Number 3, the word steward. It's translated manager in the new versions. A steward is the manager of a house. Not a house as we think of it. He's a manager, or she is a manager of a household, somebody who is rich. There on Canandaigua Lake, there's a webpage that says the 100 highest taxes of any property in the greater Rochester area. 56 of them are right there on the lake. And those people have people that take care of their money because they have lots of money. And so they can't do it all themselves. They have other things to do, so they hire somebody to take care of their money while they do their business. And this is the type of situation that Jesus. Put my hand in my pocket and turn the microphone off. So a steward is a person who manages a household or a house. So if we understand those 3 definitions, the steward or the manager are the same. The house means more than just the place where a person lives. And mammon means money that is used for illegitimate purposes. So here we have a scripture in the Old Testament. Joseph saw Benjamin with them, and he said to the steward of his house, Bring the men into the house, slaughter the animal, make ready for the men to dine at noon. Okay. Now here's a thought from an early Jewish rabbi. The world is like unto a house built. The heaven is the covering of the house. The stars are the candles in the house. The fruits of the earth are like a table spread in the house. The owner of the house, and it is indeed he that built it, is the holy blessed God. Man is in the world, as it were, the steward of the house, into whose hands the Lord has delivered all his riches. If he behaves himself well, he will find favor in the eyes of his Lord. If ill, he will remove him from stewardship. So the idea that everything belongs to God. We have real property and we have chattel property. Chattel is something that is temporary. Like if you take a house and you put it on a piece of property, I'm talking about how we define a house now, and you put it on a piece of property and you let it go for 100 years, you'll have a piece of property left. Even if it's a stone house, it will fall in. The roof will come in, the water will get in the stones or the bricks or whatever it is built from, and will destroy it. The real property is the earth, and we cannot own it. We say we have a deed that we own it, but we don't really own it. It owns us because we are temporary and it is permanent. So the idea in the New Testament times was that we are the children of God. God has created the earth for us to live in, and we are stewards of what God has entrusted to us, whether it is talents or money or time or whatever it is. We are supposed to be stewards of what God has given us. But we're not to love the money. We're to look forward to an eternal reward. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, now to the passage. Jesus said to his disciples, there was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was squandering his property. Remember the last 3 weeks we were talking about the prodigal son? What was the sin of the prodigal son? He took his inheritance and he spent it on prostitutes and he spent it on drinking and partying, and when it came down to the end, he had nothing left, and he came back to his father who received him. So here we have a related story which is about squandering. And it's the word winnowing, when they would take the wheat and they would crush the wheat with the chaff on it, and they throw it up into the air, and the wind would take the chaff off the wheat and blow it away. And so this is the idea, the money that's being absolutely wasted. Think government. Am I right? Look at the waste. So somebody says to the owner of the house, your money guy's blowing all your cash. It's being scattered abroad. What happens in a case like that? What happens when somebody who has substance, somebody who's working for the person who owns it, starts using it for their own personal benefit, or they start blowing it on this, that? What happens at that point? But before he gets arrested, what will happen? He'll get fired. But the thing is about a manager, it's more like in this case, this guy is not going to get arrested because he has power of attorney. The only thing that the person can do, well, they would have to, and in modern days, they would have to really prove some severe fraud, I think, in order for somebody to be arrested. But when you give power of attorney to somebody, if they sell a piece of property, then, hey, you signed off on it. I remember talking to a guy one time years ago who he was given power of attorney for a very wealthy guy in the Canandaigua area. He later became a politician. And this guy had this power of attorney, and he made a deal with a government entity. The government wanted this whole piece of property, and because of constrictions amongst the people of the government entity, he couldn't buy it all. So the guy who had the power of attorney said, okay, just pay me the full price for the one, and I'll throw in the other piece for free. And then the wife of the guy who gave him the power of attorney was unhappy because he turned over a piece of property for free. But what he did, he actually pulled a fast one on the government, and he didn't get arrested. But dishonesty is something that Jesus is not praising this guy for dishonesty. He's praising him for shrewdness, and I'll show you the difference here in a little bit. So he finds out. Now, this guy's likely a lawyer. So he summoned him and said, what's this here? Give an account. Now, the scriptures say we'll all stand before the judgment seat of Christ and give an account. Whatever we've done. That's what the scriptures teach. So he's fired. So this Greek word I want to talk about a little bit is oikonomos. Now, this is not a a word that we understand. It's a Greek word, and it's the Greek word which means household. When I was in Bible school back in the Stone Age, we had a whole class on stewardship, 2 hours in the, I think it was in a sophomore year, on what stewardship means and how we are stewards, how the Bible teaches that we are stewards of everything that God has given to us, that they are given to us for blessing each other, and how we're supposed to handle our finances and not squander things. But the whole idea of stewardship comes down to we as individual Christians are managers of that which God gave us. We are God's stewards. So it's figuratively used to speak of preachers and Christians as well. So here's the bad guy. What will I do? I'm not strong enough to dig. He's been doing white collar his whole life. He's probably got a degree in law. He's probably got a degree in accounting. And he doesn't know how to fix his car. And he's never done any manual labor. And he's being fired, which means his meal ticket, not only is his salary gone, but the extravagance of the things that he's been spending, which he shouldn't be spending, is going to be gone. And so he's going to have a real problem in life. He's going to have a bad reputation. People are not going to want to hire him because his name is going to be in the paper, and the lawsuit is going, everybody's going to know. You know, it's like these, you know, we've had some lawsuits in Canandaigua in recent years of people that were building things, and I don't know if we're going to hire those people or work with those people again. Probably not. So what am I going to do? I've decided what I'll do. I know what I'll do. I'll collect the bad debts. No. I don't know about this personally, I hasten to say, but if you don't pay your bills, they will send it to a collection agency. And the collection agency will get your phone number and will call you and call you and call you. And they will attempt to get some of that money back. If you listen to the radio, you hear these lawyers will say, "Do you owe the IRS money? Maybe we can get it reduced to 10%. Have you heard those ads on TV? What they're doing is they are trying to make a deal between the debtor and the person the creditor and the debtor. And so what this guy does, he has the authority to do it. So he goes to the first one and he says, "How much do you owe my master?" Now, shouldn't he know how much? Bob, you're a money guy. Shouldn't he know how much is owed? He certainly should. But he doesn't know because he's a bad manager. Because he's taking trips on the company dime when he shouldn't be. So he says, "How much do you owe?" And the first guy says, 100 jugs of olive oil. He says, "I'll take 50. Jesus is not saying it's okay to do this. Jesus is saying it was shrewd. We know Jesus, talked about honesty, and if we look at some of the things that Jesus says about honesty in the following verses, we can see that Jesus is not saying that this is a good idea. But he says, "Take your bill, write 50. Goes to the next guy. "How much do you owe?" And he replied, 100 containers of wheat. And he said, "Take your bill and make it 80. And his master commended the dishonest, see this dishonest thing, because he had acted shrewdly. For the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. Whoa. Notice, he didn't say, you owe 100. He didn't say, you owe 50. He said, how much do you owe? Now, we have a tendency to preach to people, say, oh, you're a sinner and you're a bad guy and you're a bad girl and you've done this and you've done that. Maybe the question is better asked, what have you actually done? What do you actually owe? So what are the two results of what this guy did? His boss receives more than he otherwise would have, and the power of attorney ingratiates himself to the debtor. This is what Jesus said was shrewd. He knows he's going to need a job when he's done with this, and so apparently the boss owns a wheat field, a wheat farm, and the boss has olive trees, and he crushes olive oil and sells it. And so these two businesses, maybe they'll have a place for him. People try to do things like that sometimes. I tried to do this once. Have you ever flown a long ways? I flew to India one time, and I used to fly a lot, and they gave me this coupon to give to somebody in the airline if they were doing a good job. And so when I was in Bombay thinking to come back, this long flight, I thought, can you get me in first class? And the guy goes, no, I can't do that. He says, but I'll give you the whole row of seats and coach. So that wasn't a very good thing to do because I was supposed to give it to somebody that was really, but I used it as see, that was dishonest, I think, don't you? You ever done anything like that? So that's the end of the parable. So what did Jesus say about it? Here we go. Money is temporary and for this life only. Jesus said, I tell you, make friends for yourselves by the means of dishonest wealth. The translation should be mammon. So that when it's gone, they may welcome you into the eternal homes. There's the word homes. It's translated homes, but if you look at the Greek, it's the word house. The eternal house is opposed to the temporary house. Housing is an important thing in the scriptures. In the Old Testament, when they lived in tents, they lived in tabernacles, and then they went into the promised land and they built houses, and then at the end of the year, when time was up at the end of the year, they had to go out and live in a tent in their front lawn to remember that they used to live in tents, but now they live in permanent houses. And so the same way, we are living in houses today, but it's not our house, it's temporary. Our eternal house is what we should be looking for. So Jesus says, use your money in light of eternity. This is how Jesus defined this parable. In the New American Standard, it says, I say to you, make friends for yourselves by means of the wealth of unrighteousness, so that when it fails. What? Did you ever see a picture of Germany after the war, and they have a wheelbarrow, and it's absolutely piled with bills that are absolutely worthless? Because they said to Germany, you have to pay back all this war debt. And so they got the printing press rolling, and they just printed up all this money, and the money actually became worthless. I used to have a bill that was, I think, 1,000,000 marks. I gave it to Amos because he likes coins and stuff. 1,000,000 marks. Millionaire, but it probably wouldn't even buy a loaf of bread because it's just printed. it says when it fails. I looked it up in the Greek, and it actually says when it fails, not if it fails or if you fail. Sometimes the translation says that, but it says when it fails. Use your money in light of eternity, because when it fails, you're going to need each other. This is the lesson that Jesus gave. Lesson 2. Whoever is faithful in very little is faithful also in much, and whoever is dishonest in very little is dishonest also in much. There's an early church group of books called the Didache, which means the teaching. And Clement quotes this: "The Lord saith in the gospel, if you kept not that which is little, you shall give unto you that which is great. Who shall give unto you that which is great? For I say unto you, he that is faithful in the least is also faithful in much." I remember reading a story years ago about a dry cleaner who had hired a new person to work for him, and he immediately told him when the guy came, "If you find anything, I don't care what it is, if you find anything in the pocket of the clothes, put it in a bag and tie it to a button, and make sure that the people get back what they had in their pocket." And he planted a nickel in the pants. And when the employee put the nickel in the bag and put it on the button in the suit, he knew that he had an honest employee. Because if you'd steal a nickel, you'd steal it. If you'd steal, basically what it's saying. So we need to be honest. This guy was dishonest, but we need to be honest. Jesus is very clear. He's not praising the dishonesty of this guy. He's saying, even if you take a little bit from your employee, that's dishonest. So lesson 3, what are true riches? He asks, if then you have not been faithful with the dishonest wealth, the mammon, who will entrust true riches? Well, what are true riches? You can't take your house, you can't take your Lamborghini, you can't take your boat, you can't take your snowmobile, you can't take your firearms. You can't take anything with you. So then what are true riches? The only thing you can take with you is people. That's all you can take. That's all you can take is people. It's true riches. I wonder what happened with Don. People owe the master their life, but they're unable to pay. The faithful steward asks them what they owe and shows them how to settle the debt. That's the meaning of this passage. That's what Jesus is teaching. If you've not been faithful in what belongs to another, who will give you what is your own? No slave can serve two masters. The slave will either hate the one or love the other, be devoted to the one, despise the other. A few weeks ago, we did a sermon which included the idea that hate doesn't mean vehemently dislike. It means lesser in comparison. So, Jacob I've loved, Esau I hated, doesn't mean that God hated him and despised him and didn't have any use for him. It means that Jacob was favored over his brother Esau. And so Jesus is saying, you have a choice. You will serve one or the other. You will serve money completely and God less so, or you will serve God completely and money less so. Those are the two options. And so the word despise, Jesus said, see to it that you don't despise. Everything okay, Don? Okay. You threw me for a loop there. Despise means to overlook. It says, see to it that you don't despise these little kids. And when it says despise, if you look at the meaning of the original word, it means to look over the top of their head. These kids these are the ones that belong to the kingdom of God. And so our tendency as adults is, we want to talk to adults, but Jesus was the one that got on his knees and talked to the kids. So don't look over the head of the kids. So it's a lesser I don't know what the right word is. Money is either the God or it isn't, and God is either the God or he isn't. So we can despise God by simply ignoring him, and that's what Jesus is teaching. So, in conclusion, I never say that, you know why? Don't you hate it when the preacher says, well, I got just one more point, and then he goes 3 more points? I really only got this one more point. Moses was faithful in all his house. As a testimony, as a servant, as for a testimony of those things which were to be spoken later. In Hebrews, Christ was faithful as a son over his house, whose house we are, if we hold fast our confidence and boast in our hope firm till the end. And Peter admonishes us, like good stewards of the manifold grace of God, serve one another with whatever gift each of you has received. Who's first? Right here. Mrs. Preacher here.
Years ago, when we were first married, I had a job at the finance company in Canandaigua, and I took this scripture and applied it there. I was going through a file cabinet and found many accounts that had been charged off in the 60s and 70s. And so
When you say charged off, explain what that
charged off
means.
because they were bad debts and nobody paid for them, so they were charged off.
So it means that they just weren't going to try to collect it
They weren't
anymore.
even going to try anymore. So I pulled all these accounts out, and the stack was probably about 2 feet high of all these ones. And I got a hold of corporate, and I said, do you mind if I negotiate with these people and try and get some of this money back for you? And they said, have at it. So I started on this pile, and I was able to retrieve thousands of dollars, telling people, you know, this is what your debt was, this is what's on your credit card, it was charged off, so you got bad debt, bad credit for this. How can we negotiate a cost to get some of our money back? And I had many people come into the office to pay it off and thanked me, because then they could go to the credit bureau, the report would go to the credit bureau saying that it had been taken care of. It had been discharged. And it was kind of fun, but reading the stories behind all of these things was quite interesting. But I took this back in 1980, 81, this scripture, and was able to gain thousands of dollars for the company by doing that. Fortunately, it wasn't my money, but...
They didn't give you any bonus or anything?
No bonus, just a good old pat on the back, and then sent me out to do collections.
See, everybody has debt, and it's our responsibility to tell them how they can have their debt removed by receiving the forgiveness of Jesus. Who else? Where's Crystal when you need her? Okay, Crystal.
Just the thing that I thought of while you're giving the message was that a house left alone goes to rack and ruin, and that fits in with this, but I also, because of my role at the fire department, you're exactly right. You don't take a penny, a postage stamp, or anything, because if you would do that, who says you won't take other things? So we all have to remember that. And then my last thing is, I always say there's a little larceny in everybody's heart, but my husband says, no, that's not true. He has no larceny in his heart.
Anyone else? My dad was death against stealing. He didn't care what else I did, but as long as I didn't steal. He said, I'll beat you if you catch you stealing. And I think the only thing I ever stole was a pack of cigarettes one time. And an arrowhead, I told you about that. I gave that back and gave him 4 more. There's only 2 times I stole anything, I think. And I couldn't, the guy that I stole cigarettes from, I don't know where he went. I was never able to pay him back. Think he died from smoking? Maybe. So you are God's steward. Last week, I forget, I was trying to think this morning who it was. I heard somebody who was big in music say, I don't take any credit for my voice. God gave it to me. And I thought that was a good understanding of the talent that particular person had. Can't take credit for it. Lucky to have it, but can't take credit for it. God bless. Read ahead for next week. Is that Jim? Is he okay? Oh. Well, we're done, so God bless you. Have a good one. We'll see you next week.